And seeing that sort of fully functional ecosystem and then moving back to Cleveland, where there are some fantastic ideas here, some fantastic innovators, but we're just sort of missing the depth of leadership and kind of experience around entrepreneurship and innovation.
Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. And guys, we have our sights on someone special today. Only a mother could invest in this idea.
Made this like super artistic.
That is actually absolutely correct. And that's a very, very astute assessment, actually.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of VC Hunting with me, Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. We are looking and have our scope on a very interesting man today, 16 plus years in investment banking, a Case Western interim entrepreneurship leader, and a healthcare venture provider or partner with Refinery Ventures. TODD SCHWARZINGER, thanks for joining us on the show.
Nice to be here. Nice to meet you as well.
Well, I appreciate you being here. Let's just jump right into this. As a VC hunter, I do a little bit of digging here, Todd, and I've found a little bit about your past. You started out with consulting with Accenture. You had a brief stint at Lehman Brothers, and then moved into Morgan Stanley, and now venture capital. So I want to know the consulting world to venture capital. Tell us about that story and why after all these years, 16 plus years, are you moving into VC and being an educator in venture capital? Tell us, what's the story behind that?
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting career arc. Started in consulting, kind of where I sit today in Cleveland, Ohio. Worked in the healthcare space and the exotic world of specialty chemicals. We built the first B2B exchange for the chemicals space, which was kind of interesting. Won a Smithsonian Institute Award for technological innovation there, which was kind of fun.
Wow.
And I spent, that was sort of the first part of my career, and I spent the last couple of years in the healthcare space, which is kind of really where it all started. Kind of decided I wanted to make the shift into finance out of consulting, and went to business school with the distinct focus to get into, frankly, early stage entrepreneurship. And as I got to business school, they make it so easy to be an investment banker there. That's kind of how that happened. You get on campus, they're all the banks are down there, Lehman Brothers, Morgan Stanley, and they make it pretty easy for you to make the transition. So I summered at Lehman Brothers, still have a bunch of swag from there, which I'm hoping is at some point kind of vintage. Will be worth something.
It might be worth something in the future.
Who knows, man? I've kept on it, which is good. But summered there, I actually really loved the folks there. A lot of the folks I work with are still there. It's at its current form at Barclays. But took a full-time role with Morgan Stanley. This was sort of when it was still very, very cool to be an investment banker. 2006.
Oh, come on, Todd. It's not cool to be an investment banker anymore.
It's very cool to be an investment banker. So I have a lot of friends doing it. But I came out in 2006, and there should be a sign. We were maybe at a peak market, but we had a rotational program at Morgan Stanley, and they offered up a 4-month rotation anywhere in the world you wanted to go that we had an office.
Ooh, where did you go?
Went to London for what was supposed to be 4 months, which was kind of nice, and ended up turning into 5 years. So I spent most of my career as a banker there, which was great.
Wow.
Working mostly on kind of biopharma, M&A, a little bit of medical device as well. So was there for about 5 years, made the move back to New York and sort of did the same game there for a while. Worked in the biotech space a little bit too, took a couple companies public, did a lot of M&A in the medical device space, and sort of a great experience. But it's pretty funny if you go back to my initial days at business school. I mean, I still had that itch to sort of work in the early stage side of the market. Working at Morgan Stanley, it's difficult to work with some of the earlier stage innovative companies. So the transition was something I was looking for.
Yeah, that's something that I really want to talk about here because, I mean, you're coming from a consulting background. You've said it twice now, which means it's something that you're passionate about and certainly on your heart, and certainly the things that I've read about you've talked about. You're passionate about early stage starts, but at the same time, you've spent all this time in the healthcare and life sciences. So can I ask the question, like, what drew you to the life sciences? Or was this always hey, I'm an investment banker and life sciences is kind of my forte and I've garnered and gained experience here, so that's what I'm good at? Or has there always been a knack and a desire to be in the life sciences and the biotech field?
Well, it sort of started with my consulting experience. So the last 2 years as a consultant, I spent time in the pharmaceutical space, and it's pretty. And you see it on the West Coast too. There's it's a war for talent, both between and healthcare. And the piece that drew me to healthcare versus sort of traditional tech and other industries was that literally, going to work every day, my clients were really trying to save people's lives, which was pretty amazing to me. And you actually saw it. It was a pretty distinct and clear and genuine passion, which was pretty neat. So, I mean, some of the stuff that we were working on was one of the companies I worked on the M&A side literally had a drug that if a child in their early development took it, they would live a normal life. And if they didn't, they would typically pass away before they were 3 or 4 years old. I mean, some of the stuff that we worked on was pretty amazing. So it's hard not to get excited and passionate about that when you're around people that are really, as on a day-to-day basis, trying to save lives. So that was kind of fun. So, and then the nature and the pace, it's a pretty fun space to be in. Healthcare is, it's a little slower moving than some of your other traditional tech fields, but there's some amazing innovation right now, particularly around the biotech space. And that's what's kind of kept it going. So.
Oh, for sure. I mean, absolutely. And you ended up garnering a patent during your time over there around 2000. And I have to say this because it was really intriguing to me. In 2000, you achieved a patent for a method and a system for enhancing commercial transactions conducted via a communications network. What the hell? What is that?
Pretty broad sweeping, right? Now that was the project we did around the chemical space. So it was the first business to business exchange. So we were supporting our client building the first kind of automated purchasing flow with a couple of their customers, and sort of broke ground, I guess, in the chemical space for what we kind of call B2B exchanges today. So it was pretty interesting. So
awesome.
Yeah, I got pulled through on the patent there too, which is great. So.
It's nice to have that under your belt. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about the past. I really want to talk about your kind of desire, your passion for early stage VCs. You were in an article from Case Western, 5 questions that they asked you from August 2016, 2009. And you had, quote, you said, "I have a penchant for early stage startups and helping the ecosystem and entrepreneurship and fostering innovation. Ideas are critical." I really want to unpack this idea that you have a penchant for early stage startups and helping the ecosystem. Talk us through that. You can have a passion for early stage startups, but helping the ecosystem is a broader narrative than just helping individuals and startups and individual founders and teams. So walk us through that. How are you helping individuals right now? And also, how are you helping the larger ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, you got to kind of pull the thread on my move back home. So the last 5 years I've lived out in San Francisco and made the transition back to my hometown in Cleveland, Ohio, which is not one that people often make, but it's been a pretty fantastic move back for me. Last couple of years, I ran the life sciences practice for Silicon Valley Bank out in the Bay Area, which gave me exposure to obviously the robust and well-functioning, kind of crazy ecosystem in the Bay Area, kind of supporting innovation in tech and in healthcare. And seeing that sort of fully functional ecosystem and then moving back to Cleveland, where there are some fantastic ideas here, some fantastic innovators, but we're just sort of missing the depth of leadership and kind of experience around entrepreneurship and innovation. So having moved back here, and frankly, we moved back, my wife and I, she's never lived in Cleveland. So this has been a huge adjustment for her. She's an LA native. She's adjusting to winters here.
From what I understand, you actually moved back to Cleveland for dog food. Can you explain that?
We did. It's a fantastic story. Well, we've been in San Francisco for about 5 years, and we're starting the family sort of process right now. And we decided we probably wanted to get out of the Bay Area to tackle that. So we looked at a bunch of different markets. My wife took a job in San Francisco with a company that's based about 30 minutes south of my hometown, running a couple of their dog food brands. So big business, man. I had no idea, but so they moved her entire team back to the mothership, which is about 30 minutes south of where I grew up. So that was sort of the catalyst to move back, and catalyst for me to start kind of exploring opportunities here in the market. And first joined a fund called Refinery Ventures, which is based down in Cincinnati, focused on tech and health tech. And then as a part of that, actually transitioned into sort of an interim role, driving entrepreneurship and supporting commercialization at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. So,
and I do want to talk about that.
Interesting. Yeah.
I really want to dig into that, but I have to ask because I heard a commercial the other day on the radio. This is probably about maybe 6 or 7 months ago, but I heard a commercial on the radio that was talking about these guys, radio pundits were talking about how this new dog food company is selling like real steak. And some of the dog food meals are more expensive than human meals. Does your wife have to do something to do with that?
It's big. It's big business, man. It's big business. People end up spending more on their dogs and themselves half the time. But yeah, it's not. It's massive.
That's crazy. So let's.
I've been exposed to this crazy influencer world in that space too, which is pretty amazing. Some of these
Really?
guys, it's interesting stuff. So more followers than you. Well, maybe not you, but me.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Leaving the Bay Area and moving out to Cleveland, I really like the way that you posited this idea. As there was an opportunity for you to kind of come back to your roots and obviously support your wife and the dog food habits and the dog food profession that she's in. But I like the way that you posited that it gave you an opportunity to really look into the ideas that are coming out of Cleveland. And you said ideas are critical in the article. This is really fascinating because usually people don't look at individuals and say, hey, you're going to move from San Francisco to Cleveland? Good luck, brother. I mean, you're in VC, you're in venture capital, and your startups. So tell us, what is it about the Cleveland area? Is it just is an untapped resource, kind of like Atlanta? I kind of see Atlanta where I am is slow bacon, everyone's homebody, slow VC, slow venture capital, slow entrepreneurship kind of mentality. Is Cleveland like that? Is it a slow boil or is it different?
Well, I mean, that part of it is just the tenor of the ecosystem, right? So San Francisco, the Bay Area is just completely posited and driven around entrepreneurship and innovation, right? And startups.
That's awesome.
Right? And in the Midwest, not just Cleveland, but other markets, it's just a more established industry, right? There are budding innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystems here, but they're still in the early days. So when I came out here, in the role that I had, my last role out on the West Coast, I saw a really high volume of early stage startups, and you start to get pattern recognition. There were some great ideas that got funded, and some not so great ideas that got funded as well. And I would say just the raw materials and sort of the depth of ideas and innovation here in Cleveland was something that I was actually really encouraged by when I got here. And sitting on campus here at Case, you see that every day. I mean, some of the work that our faculty and some of the folks in the ecosystem here, be it the Cleveland Clinic or University Hospital or just the broader healthcare ecosystem here, some really fantastic ideas being generated here. And again, if a lot of them, if you literally just picked them up and put them out on the West Coast, they'd be funded, right? So there's a challenge at taking what we've got here in this fantastic set of kind of raw materials and connecting them to capital sources, connecting them to the leadership they need to be successful. And I think that's kind of that's sort of the challenge here. And what was really excited to me coming back here is that small successes, unlike out on the West Coast, you can really move the needle here, which is kind of fun. So.
And I was about to say, I think that's probably an exciting aspect of working out where you are now is with your connections out West, you can really be a liaison. You can really be a bridge to great ideas out in Cleveland and connect them with funding sources out West. I'm sure there are more funding sources that are being grown in your hometown and around that area, but certainly having that role allows you to really connect with both sides of the world where you are now and obviously your previous life. But I want to talk about this idea of interim entrepreneurship leader. Now, this is a term that's new to me and in the university space. So what does an interim entrepreneurship leader do at a university? And I'm sure you do a lot of fun stuff, but walk us through that. What does an interim entrepreneurship leader do at a university?
Well, I sit in an executive director role for the entrepreneurship. It's the Veal Institute for Entrepreneurship here at Case Western, which is a couple-fold. One, it's sort of just supporting the entrepreneurship ecosystem here on campus. So providing programming, supporting curriculum, offering experiential learning opportunities for the students here, and really just building sort of the entrepreneurial ecosystem here on campus across both undergrad, graduate students, and frankly up to the faculty as well.
Is there a big appetite at Case Western University there?
Well, I think if you look at any academic institution, entrepreneurship can be really a unifying source in terms of the fact that it can be interdisciplinary. And frankly, as you think about some of the largest generators of innovation and truly unique ideas, they're coming out of universities, right? So how do you take advantage of that? That's entrepreneurship. So,
I think you're probably on the more progressive side of the university world, because generally when people think of entrepreneurship, they don't immediately think of universities as, creating these legions of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and these great startup ideas. It's usually, that famous guy actually dropped out of university and that's how he made his startup. And so what are you seeing different now? Because when I was going through university, I went to Florida State. I could see that back there, Florida State. Have to give props to that. Obviously, my brother went to Georgia Tech, but I can even speak for Georgia Tech as well. When we were going back to university in the late 90s, I mean, entrepreneurship wasn't even a word that was used on campus. So has it changed that drastically? And what are you seeing in terms of the entrepreneurship ideas coming out of the students at Case Western today?
I mean, I think it's a couple fold. It's not even necessary. And if you look at some of the most successful startups out there, they've been founded by folks that didn't necessarily start straight out of school. There are folks that, quit school, and there's some prolific stories about that. There are folks that started them right out of undergrad. But in a lot of cases, we're just arming the students with a set of skills to you can use your entrepreneurial background and skill set within a large company. Entrepreneurship. You can drive innovation inside of a large company using a lot of the same skills that we're teaching our entrepreneurship students on a day-to-day basis. And in a lot of cases, successful startups are founded by folks who, we're giving them hopefully the training today. They'll go work for a large company or another startup and run out on their own at some point with the background that we're giving them today. So. I think it's sort of a long-dated experiential process for an entrepreneur to build their experience before they kick off on their own endeavor. In a lot of cases, there's a bunch of different ways to tackle it. So
I had a really interesting conversation with a venture capitalist in one of my other interviews last week, and we were talking about offline about universities being a potential, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here in my trajectory of thinking, but that universities can really be the incubators of startups and entrepreneurship in the future. And then we began to argue about the faculty and the staff, the old guard, maybe having to die out, maybe allow for more progressive ideas to come in. But is that something that you see as a real potential in the future, that universities will not be these walled gardens of sacrosanct information, but will really be an opportunity to have incubating startups and entrepreneurs in the future? Do you see that happening, or is that really something that's tied to the culture of each university specifically?
I think a part of it is culture, but a part of it is providing an opportunity set for undergraduates, graduates, and faculty to really learn. Frankly, there are folks that probably have more so. Some universities have a bigger focus on entrepreneurship than others, but I think it can be a fundamental skill that can kind of be pervasive across the university. And again, it may not be somebody going out and starting their own company, but it can be somebody driving innovation in whatever endeavor they're working on and leveraging the same skills that you might have to some extent in terms of going out, identifying a market, building your own company to address a need for a customer. A lot of that stuff can be done internally at a large corporation too. So again, it goes about a lot of the skills that you're going to learn that would be helpful for you starting off on your own endeavor can be something that can be helpful in just about every walk of your career, right? So, and I think at a university setting, it's upon myself and other folks in positions like mine and our faculty and other folks that are driving the curriculum to give students an opportunity for experiential learning around entrepreneurship. So to be a part of kind of early stage endeavors and seeing what that's like, it's going to help them in every kind of walk of their career. So
it's really, really awesome. I just had a thought that came to my gut here, Todd. I was like, man, you're really talking up Case Western and their entrepreneurship programs.
I have to, man. That's my seat. I have to do it, right? That's good. No, but it's fantastic.
Obviously. As I was doing a little bit of research on you and looking at your background, by the way, congratulations on joining Twitter a couple months ago.
Yeah, you like that, right? I'm on there, man. I'm a listener. But yeah, I appreciate that.
Well,
I'm catching up to technology. It's fantastic.
No, it's all good. I'm just poking you in the ribs here. But one of the questions that I thought about as I was looking up, kind of your history and kind of the context around you is the question that boiled up in my gut was, where is TODD SCHWARZINGER headed? Where is TODD SCHWARZINGER? And the reason, let me give you some context to this question. As I was thinking about, okay, so I came from a consulting background as well, 12 plus years. So I understand that world. I engaged with a lot of the Accenture folks and the Deloitte folks and these types of individuals. And I've also worked in healthcare. So I understand the consulting, moving from consulting, moving into the university space, moving into being interim director, having a passion for early stage startups. I had a question because I couldn't find it. Like, what are you up to? Like, what is TODD SCHWARZINGER going to be doing? What could TODD SCHWARZINGER stamp on what could you stamp and something that you're doing in the near future that's coming up that would be worth talking about is what I'm thinking about. Do you have something that's in the works? Do you have a side hustle or something that you can give us a little bit of insight to? Because I was like, well, he's helping out with this university. He loves early stage startups. I'm sure he's pouring himself in there, but this guy's a consultant. He's seen the big game. He's got to have something brewing. So that's the question. Do you have something brewing?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that's exciting me right now is honestly making an impact in the market where I live. I mean, I grew up around here, right? And I do see
right.
kind of innovation and, the entrepreneurship ecosystem playing a big role in what's ahead for Cleveland. We've got some very traditional roots around manufacturing and sort of old world, and I think we've got an opportunity to really play a big hand. Folks at my seat can play a big hand in helping to drive what's next for not just Cleveland, but I think the Midwest in general and sort of some of these markets outside the coast. So,
well, maybe we'll see some big things coming out of the Midwest and Cleveland with TODD SCHWARZINGER connected to it.
There you go, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. But no, I think, part of the strategy for Refinery is actually to sort of bridge that gap that we talked about earlier, and the fact that there are a lot of great ideas here. There's, frankly, if you think about the problems, the markets that are being disintermediated, a lot of those markets are here in the Midwest, Cleveland, some of the other sort of old tested markets. That's where a lot of the problems lie, and a lot of the industries and businesses and markets that are going to be disintermediated. Now, a lot of that work's being done on the coast, but frankly, you can make a strong argument that being closer to the actual problem is going to you're going to make a more distinctive impact. So I just think there's a huge opportunity in these markets to really play a role in sort of what's next. And that's kind of the plan for Refinery Ventures.
Really cool.
Part of it is kind of bridging that gap. We're looking for folks that we can bring back to the market. A couple of our investments are, former folks that were on the coast that are sort of back in the region trying to make an impact. And, part of our strategy is to really focus on that, bridging the gap in terms of talent here, identifying great opportunities and putting the right folks in spots to take advantage of those. So,
well, that's a perfect segue, because my next question was around Refinery Ventures. Tell us, Refinery Ventures, why did you join them? What do they, because you've seen how other companies do, investing. So why did you choose Refinery, and what does Refinery do differently?
I mean, we kind of I keep going back to it, and it probably sounds a little bit cliche, but I really was looking for opportunities to make an impact here. In my next role, I kind of wanted to make a fundamental impact. If I'm coming back home, I want to be a part of sort of moving this region forward. And in looking for that, Refinery Ventures was kind of just simpatico with that ideal and what I was trying to do. So the view is to sort of build up the region through innovation, entrepreneurship, and supporting some of the folks really trying to drive this region forward. So again, a big part of that's finding talent and connecting it with great opportunities here. Another piece of it is identifying and supporting some of the developing entrepreneurs and leaders in the region here, and that's kind of where we're focused. So for me, it's a regional focus in this area. So we're Midwest largely, opportunistic outside. We have one investment out on the West Coast, one on the East, but a lot of what we're trying to do is find opportunities here in the sort of underserved Midwest, where there is that little bit of a kind of a gap in terms of capital. So that's a big part of it. And again, is finding really strong leaders that we can back. That's really sort of part and parcel to the strategy.
That's really cool. I know a little bit about your history, having read it, and so it's kind of cool to go back to your hometown. I think in an article I read, you're like a couple miles from your school or something like that. Not many people get to go back to their high school and like try to make an impact. Most people try to forget those years.
They do. I do as well. But no, it's been pretty fantastic, and it's interesting after kind of 16 years away from the market to come back. And there are some really exciting sort of trends here, some things that are very different than when I was here before. And I think there's just an exciting opportunity here. So,
well, I love that you're helping move the next generation forward out in the Midwest. Obviously, you're focused on early stage companies. You're looking to help them grow in that area. But at the same time, you keep your foot in the deep sciences realm. I noticed that you still read deep science books. I have one here in front of me. It's Deep Learning for the Life Sciences, Applying Deep Learning to Genomics, Microscopy, Drug Discovery, and More by Bharath Ramsundar. Some of the topics are basics of machine learning and molecular data, deep chemistry, variational anecdotes, encoders, and generative adversarial networks. What the hell?
A lot of depth there. Well, that's my reading, right? But now, I mean, the broad strokes. I mean, the next wave of innovation in the healthcare space, AI and ML are a big piece of that, and that's sort of where that reading came from. But for the most part, where we're focused is around the health tech space. So, where the intersection of technology and healthcare, and where we sit here in the Midwest, particularly me up here in Cleveland, we've got the Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital here. It's just a hugely successful ecosystem, really deep pool of clinical expertise, and just some fantastic industry partners here. So. Healthcare is definitely a kind of cornerstone for growth, I think, in the region, and that's kind of where I'm spending my time.
Well, for anyone out there, if you want to, we're going to have all the information on Todd Schwarzinger below later. But if you want to tweet at him and let him know of any deep science books that he can read, he's already reading some of the the deepest ones that I've ever been able to find. So thanks so much for this last question, and this will be the one that'll see us out here. The highest peak in Europe, Mount Elbrus in Russia. Am I saying that right? Tell us about that story. You climbed the highest peak in Europe. What was that all about?
I think it's, I have some friends who have some interesting hobbies. I think that's probably the background there. But come on. You don't
wake up on a Saturday and be like,
well, it was sort of the break between right before business school, but I had a couple friends that we're deciding on their next sort of challenge, and climbing the highest peak in Europe topped the list for a couple folks. So I joined the trip, which is pretty interesting. 18,600 feet, Mount Elbrus. So it's one of the 7 summits. It was pretty fun. So,
wow.
A heck of a lot of work, man, but it was.
Were you married? Were you married then? Did your wife have any reservations?
I was not married. No, safety was less of a precaution at that point, but it was a pretty awesome trip.
That's awesome. Well, Todd Schwarzinger, thanks so much for being on the show. This has been a great conversation, and I'd love to cordially invite you to season 2 if you want to come on and talk a little bit more in depth about the investments you've made and some of the experience you've had around that. I understand that this is relatively kind of your sophomore year in venture capital of sorts.
So
So I'd love to dig into that for our next episode, if you're keen on that.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thanks for the time, and I love what you do. So thanks for that.
Thanks so much, guys, for this episode of VC Hunting with me and Todd. Appreciate it. See you guys next episode. Man, I really had a great conversation with Todd Schwarzinger from Refinery Ventures, also an interim entrepreneurship leader at Case Western. What a great conversation. What a really cool dude. One of the things that I love about being able to interview all sorts of different venture capitalists and entrepreneurs all over the world, and we're growing, guys, in big ways. One of the things that I love is just seeing so many different perspectives. One of the things that I love about Todd, and I didn't say this to him because I didn't want to maybe sound that way, but I did say a little bit, but I come from a consulting world. There's a lot of sympathy that I have for Todd, empathy for Todd, but what's interesting is I ended up moving into the venture capital game and the VC game and the entrepreneurship game through consulting as well. It was a great opportunity, consulting, to see the insides of so many different companies, so many different projects, so many different happenings and things that were going on, that it really gives you a broad perspective of what's going on in the world. And if you're assertive, if you're initiative, if you're one of those types of people that really takes life by the reins, being a consultant, you can leverage all that experience to create amazing things. Now, what's really cool, what I love about what Todd is doing, is he's taking all that experience, all that knowledge that he's garnered and gained, and he's giving it back to the next generation of entrepreneurs through the university setting, which, as I posited in the interview, which is a little counterintuitive, I think, to the vast majority of the world. Generally, people don't think of, the best ideas coming out of universities. But, Todd and I both know that some of the best ideas really are coming out of universities. They're just not the ones that are in the press, because the press wants to talk about the guy who dropped out of Harvard, the guy who dropped out of Princeton, the lady who dropped out of Stanford, right? Those get the press. And so I think it's important to remember, especially for myself in this moment in time, that as much as I despise university, maybe I should have a conversation about that. Remember, guys, I have 3 master's degrees, guys. I've gone through university. I wouldn't say I despise it, but as much as I have, I'm on the fence about the long-term legitimacy and the long-term validity and the long-term value add of university. Let's put it that way. With the tension that I have with university and the long-term value to cost to value ratio that university is quickly becoming, it's great to see individuals like Todd who are really investing in the entrepreneurship side of that. One thing that I really, really loved about our conversation is that he wants to help early stage startups and helping the ecosystem and entrepreneurship and fostering innovation. I could totally tell that Todd Schwarzinger is one of those guys who really loves doing that. And it was great having this conversation with him. One thing I did want to bring up though, that highest peak, come on, the highest peak. I was hoping he would tell me something like it was a dare, or it was like climbing this highest peak was like a life-changing event. Apparently to Todd, climbing the highest peak in Europe, what's it called? Mount Elbrus in Russia? Apparently to Todd, it's just another Tuesday. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you want to know more about Todd Schwarzinger and what's going on with him, make sure that you find your way over to vchunting.com/Todd Schwarzinger. Thanks for joining us again in today's VC Hunting Podcast with me, Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. I'll see you guys next time.